Copyright 2014 Math, Diagnostics, and Intervention, all rights reserved. We're going to take a look at the multiplication of signed numbers, and we're going to take a look at it through a pattern. And what we have here is a set of multiplication problems where the first column here is all the number 3. Every number there is a 3. The numbers in this column are being decreased by 1. We're going from the number 4 to the number 3 to 2 to 1 to 0 and decreasing that column by 1 each time we get to a new problem. And in our answer column over here we have 12, 9, 6, 3, and 0, and we are decreasing those by 3 each time. 3 less than 12 is 9, 3 less than 9 is 6, 3 less than 6 is 3, 3 less than 3 is 0. And what we want to do is we want to look at what happens when this pattern continues. We're going to keep the 3 in our first column of numbers, and we're going to decrease 0 by 1, which means 3 times negative 1, and the answer will be 3 less than 0, negative 3. Again, in this column here, we are decreasing our numbers by 1. That pattern continues. In this column here, we are decreasing our answer by 3 each time. That answer continues, so that pattern continues. So 3 times negative 2, again, the pattern continues, and that will be equal to negative 6. What this shows is that we have an example of a positive times a negative being a negative number. And this will hold true in general. If I have 4 times negative 5, a positive times a negative is a negative, and 4 times 5 is 20. So 4 times negative 5 is negative 20. We also have the commutative property of multiplication that says that 3 times 4, well, that's 12. If I swap what I am multiplying and make it 4 times 3, that's also 12. This will work with our negative numbers as well. If I swap my 4 and negative 5 and make that negative 5 times positive 4, again, that will be negative 20. What this shows is that if I have one positive and one negative and I am multiplying the two numbers together, the answer will be negative. So when we have negative 9 times 8, we have one positive and one negative, the answer will be negative, and 9 times 8 is 72. Negative 7 times positive 6, one positive, one negative, will be negative 6 times 7, 42. Now let's take a look at what happens when we multiply a negative times a negative. Again, we're going to take a look at this from a pattern perspective. In our first column here, we have the number negative 2, and that stays the same all the way down. Our second column here of numbers, we have decreasing values of 1 by 1 each time, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And in our last column over here, our answer column, our answers are actually increasing by 2. Negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6, negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4, negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2, and negative 2 plus 2 is 0. This pattern will also continue. So we're going to keep the negative 2, we're going to decrease 0 by 1, and we're going to increase 0 by 2. The pattern continued. We kept the negative 2 here, we decreased 0 by 1 here, and we increased 0 by 2 over here. One more time, negative 2 times negative 2 will be equal to positive 4. What this is an example of is a negative times a negative is a positive, and that will hold true. So if I have negative 6 times negative 3, negative times a negative is a positive, and that will be 18, since 6 times 3 is 18. If I have negative 7 times negative 4, negative times a negative is a positive, 7 times 4 is 28. So To review, we have four different ways or four different values of signs that we can have for multiplication of signed numbers. We can have a positive times a positive. That's our old, just regular old multiplication. That's equal to a positive. We can have a positive times a negative, which is a negative. We can have a negative times a positive, which is a negative. And we can have a negative times a negative, which is a positive. Or the quick way to remember it is when I am multiplying two numbers that have the same sign, the result is positive. If I am multiplying two numbers that are oppositely signed, the result is negative. So let's take a look at a couple of quick examples. If I have negative 4 times 3, and I have negative 6 times negative 5, I have 5 times 7, and I have 3 times negative 2. How are we going to answer all of these? Well, the signs are different. In my negative 4 times positive 3, negative 4 times positive 3, the signs are different, so the end result is negative. 4 times 3 is 12. Negative 6 times negative 5, the signs of those are the same, therefore the result will be positive. 6 times 5 is 30. 5 times 7, the signs are the same, the result will be positive 35, just like it's always been. 3 times negative 2, 3 times negative 2, we've got a positive times a negative, the signs are different, so the result will be negative 6. If you can remember this rule for the multiplication of signed numbers, you should have very little difficulty with signed number multiplication. Good luck.